Welcome to the Space Economy, Grant. I'm glad you can join us here today.
Thanks for having me, George.
It's a real pleasure. I've been following your work for a while now. I know we talked at least a couple times already throughout the years. And I want to just make sure that everyone gets a nice introduction to what you're working on, particularly when it comes to Copernic Space. And so just give everyone a quick, minute or 2 minute summary on what's going on over there.
Great. Yeah. So Copernic Space is a project that technically has a long history. Started with my grandfather, who was an aerospace professor in Warsaw, Poland during communist times, and really even had some writings around this idea that's kind of used, I think, wrongly in the space industry today, which is democratization of space. This is something that later my mother and I started really taking seriously as far as how to apply that into real economic senses. And what came out of that is through some of our activities in the space economy over the years, and because of my background, her background, and some other people that are part of the team, we understood how to apply certain combinations, almost an e-commerce experience embedded on top of quite a complex blockchain infrastructure that allowed really for what we view as kind of the economic operating system for the digital space economy. So how are all these new space companies, and as well as these older ones, going to better manage and monetize what we call digital space assets? So satellite imagery, data, we're doing fractional ownership of satellites, use cases with some really great companies in the space. So we're really here to take, the space industry and turn that into, that promise of the $1 trillion space economy by also making it a lot more accessible to not just the average company, but also, the average person. I've spent years quite successfully in the crypto space, and one of the obvious defined and proven use cases is that it has allowed larger swaths of the global population to begin participating and acquiring ownership in valuable enterprises through what we call digital assets.
So I know we both share a background in blockchain and in crypto, and I know that we're also now both pretty passionate about space, but you come from a long line of space enthusiasts. Can you tell us a little bit about that and how that relates to the work that you're doing now for Copernic Space?
Sure. Yeah, thanks. History is important when it comes to these things. So my grandfather was actually a professor around airspace for the military academy, or what you would call pretty much the Air Force of Poland, back in the 60s and the 70s. So he was, stuck behind, the Iron Curtain, and was stuck in communism, and really was a progressive kind of open market, capitalistic kind of minded guy. And he really started, the birth and the seed around the democratization of the space economy, let's say, as a life mission in our family. I know that's kind of been overused in a marketing sense, I think, a little bit in the space industry already. For us, it's a very kind of authentic purpose. And that's because, his students quite literally didn't have access to, the intellectual capital, information, resources, you name it. And also the West, lost out by being unable to interact with or use the intellectual, capital that was out here. So that's, really when it was really started, that led into Copernic Space, which is something conceptually, actually, my mother and I first started about 6 years ago. And I was already in the blockchain space, and was actually on my way to co-founding CoinFirm, which became a global leader in big data analytics and anti-money laundering for crypto and blockchain. But we put it on pause because blockchain technology, wasn't at a mature enough point yet to execute what we wanted and the vision we had. And even in some way, more importantly, B, the space industry or the environment around it, I don't think was anywhere near mentally where it needed to be. And just now is kind of getting to that point, right? So that led to the creation of Copernic Space, and something that, you know, I've invested obviously years into conceptualizing, creating, and now quite a bit into developing itself as a product, and slowly yet very quickly, as you've seen, kind of bringing it to market.
Yeah. So one of the things I know that we've talked about previously, one of the things that you're excited about working on is the ability for firms to share the use of satellites. How does that work? How does the technology behind that work? And how is your method different from, say, a leasing program or something like that?
Well, I'm not going to go into, you know, let's say the model of the companies or startups that are going to be our users that we're collaborating with right now around some of those aspects, but I see this in twofold, right? So take a cool, you can still call them a startup, but one of these bigger guys who they want to do a new type of satellite, right? And they want to launch this. The satellite is going to do X, Y, and Z, is going to generate revenue in X, Y, and Z ways. And here's the expectations, right? So we're going to have a layer on the platform outside of the marketplace, kind of innately in it, but outside of it, called the Smart Fund. So our thing is to, based on, you know, also my experience successfully being around the token sales space and seeing various models around that, to allow, for example, that satellite company to, instead of going to VCs and going through this big thing, selling equity, diluting their ownership of their own company, you know, any entrepreneur who's seriously been through that phase knows that it's actually probably one of the most stressful and least pleasant phases of all these things, and it's extremely time and you know, consumes a lot of resources. To structure,
well, it's one of the things that we see where, you know, entrepreneurs are in the business of their business, right? They're not in the business of raising money. They're not in the business of finance unless you know, that somehow touches what their general operations are. So when they're competing and when they're meeting with these firms, sometimes it's competitive. It's adversarial almost.
Yeah, that's a whole nother rabbit hole to unpack. But so provide, let's say, the satellite company the capability to, hey, we need $30 million to build this and launch it. Yep. We're going to tokenize it across this sort of element, provide those tokens for the general public, of course, you know, proper regulatory processes and filters throughout that, KYC, AML wise, and allow, you know, that promise I was just talking about, the democratization end of, you know, George now can own a, let's say, a piece of a satellite, the company and its future, you know, whatever the rights were put into the token they acquired, so future revenue stream, whatever it may be. And now that startup, it raised 30 million, maybe more if they didn't put a cap on it, for example, to execute this. And they didn't have to give up equity. They didn't have to go through that process. And, you know, I have this kind of quote that I actually used first in response to a big space company talking about, you know, democratization being that, you know, it's not just NASA who's shooting up satellites. And my thing was, well, I don't have enough money to own and shoot up a satellite, but I have enough money to own 1/1000th of one. So, and contribute to the further advancement of growth of the space economy. Because if we think that this is exclusively going to happen, continuously happen through government and big VC sources, I think we're only going to scratch the surface of what the true potential and how fast we can progress it. So that's one end of it, right? This is how you can fractionally own a satellite in a certain sense. The other end of it would be more in this model that we're partnering up with. I don't want to mention the
No,
company yet
it's
until we
fine.
come out publicly with it. But what they're doing is more, it's a software play really, to where a satellite has X amount of orbits around Earth a year, pretty much. And we're going to tokenize each one of these orbits. And with that token and with that access to that orbit, right, you get direct access into their application panel and the capability to pretty much do what you want with the satellite, in the sense of generate this image or that image, and get outside of this, which is a big industry issue of, acquisition, asking for, defining with these other sort of satellite players, and then them having selling it in. Well, maybe the model is I kind of call it satellite ride sharing.
Now, a question here when it comes to maybe sensitive EO data. How do
Uh-huh.
we make sure that the people who are sharing are people that maybe aren't, observing troop movements or something like that?
Uh, Well, for example, from our end, right? So I do have some regulatory background, and we also look at this from a technical reason way, and that's also why kind of blockchain comes in important in this. My thing is to not sell blockchain. My thing is to sell a solution. But when it comes up, and I can talk about the benefits, great. Um, so first off, we have quite a strict KYC end, right? Commercially, for entities that
So
are,
just to pull it apart. So
yeah,
you're gonna
sorry,
the customers, right? Know your customer.
yeah.
You know the customers that are coming on board. They have some sort of, and again, not to get into the weeds of the blockchain piece of it here, but they must have some sort of digital identity that they've been verified. So it's just
Right.
not any random person, ride sharing on the satellite. They've
Our
been vetted and approved.
yeah, yeah. I don't want to get in the technical backgrounds of it, but yeah. So I'm sorry. I come out of regulatory. So for some people, KYC isn't like a very well understood term. Just like AML is anti-money laundering, right? So these are two elements that right off the bat we take seriously. We control this environment in the application where we are providing as much of a decentralized and P2P infrastructure as possible. But just like you said, we have to be aware and sensitive to a lot of things. We can't have that full on crypto approach to it. So as you've seen, I think in our MVP before, already when an entity is making an offer, they, for example, can exclude certain nations, right? Look at us more as, the marketplace, the platform that hosts, like I said, the economic operating system. We're of course going to introduce, as many sensible, let's say security or kind of filters such as that. But also we're not here to solve, and we're not here to fulfill the security and regulatory requirements of these companies themselves and for them, right? We'll give them the tools to help them do that to the best of our capabilities, but we're also not there to totally control and monitor everything, and actually goes kind of against our ethos. But we do think about that very much. And also from a data access security, one reason why, we're using NFT, so non-fungible tokens, and embedding access rights and license rights within it is because that serves as the only that serves as a fully traceable, immutable, auditable, and the only way that they can access that license and that data set. So without that token, they won't be able to access it. And it also eliminates another security concern, which is these kind of logins, credentials, secondary logins and credentials aspects, which is actually where a lot of entities get breached in very simple ways, actually.
Right. It's the easy fishing exercises and expeditions that actually catch the people. Right. I mean, it's the individuals that get caught. That's where the cybersecurity risk is. It's not necessarily a firm-wide, act that set them off. It's because one individual had an easy password. Right. I mean, sometimes it really is just that simple. One individual fell for a phishing scheme or got malware on their computer. It can be something really simple like that.
Oh, especially if you're in companies connected in the network and all that stuff. I mean, as a co-founder and kind of a public face around CoinFirm, right? Which is, We literally go after
Yeah.
scams, frauds, and
Yeah.
hacks and stuff.
Yeah.
I've
You
seen,
take out the bad guys. I mean, there's nothing wrong with
I've
taking out the bad
seen,
guys.
I've been targeted and have seen so many different types of these, these kind of attempts at breach and scams and stuff. But yeah, either way, thanks for that question, because that's important, and I want to show that we're mature and considerate and already thinking of that, before public product.
Yeah. Well, and it makes sense, right? Like, I mean, you come from a background where understanding regulation, understanding compliance was just part of your best practices. So it makes sense that, with Copernic Space, you're going to do something very similar, right? It's not move fast and break things when there's already regulatory structure in place.
Right.
And
Yeah. It's
so,
funny
yeah,
though, because, when my background around that is around CoinFirm, and when we came out, it's a lot, there was this funny thing of like, well, why are you doing this for crypto? You don't need. So it's not as, just like for you and us talking about what we're talking about around space and applying it this way, for us, it's kind of, oh, that makes sense. That's obviously the natural road, progressive forward, et cetera.
yeah.
For most people, like it's still kind of abstract, but as I think I told you on last call, when I get on calls with these, especially the startups, the SMEs, the guys who are really, churning and pushing this space economy forward, I have like an 80, 90% conversion rate onto commitment to do this, right?
Mhm.
So I'm touching on a nerve somewhere there that hasn't bubbled up to the top in a very loud way yet, but it's festering down there.
Awesome. Now I know we've also got some interest with Copernic Space because there's also that community element of it, right? So it's more than just firms, right? It could be researchers or people who, want to access specific data, or maybe they want to be able to tell the system what sort of data they're looking for.
Right.
How does that work in Copernic Space, and why is that so important?
So as of right now, as the platform structured in its first iteration, it's push, what I call. So now it's like a marketplace in the sense of pre-package, put on, here it is, acquire, access. One of the big things about us is we put everything under one hood, so you don't have to leave, and you can manage all of your space assets or applications that you need to access in one place. But as of right now, it's okay. I package this satellite imagery. I'm putting it on the marketplace. It's an NFT. Someone comes and acquires it. They get the NFT and they access it. But really, I think about 70, 80% of actual traffic and commerce, especially in the future around this economy, is going to be pull based. So it's going to be on demand. It's going to be request based. It's going to be fulfill my needs that I have now.
Yeah.
Right.
And so that's the difference of, going in to buy a suit and having a suit made for you, right? So
Yes.
for these data sets, right, the pull versus push model, right? So
Right.
you're telling them what you need versus here's my catalog.
Right. And I mean, even in the push instance, we allow for them to communicate and do, negotiate and create what we call private offers that don't go on the marketplace. Is just a link that they can communicate within each other and execute transactions privately. But from the data on what I call data on demand, yeah, entities come on and they tell us through, at first, very simplistic ways, what they need. We hit our database, let's say, of providers, and they fulfill it. We connect that deal up and execute it. I think the first 2 years on this platform, the biz dev and the transaction execution is going to be very proactive on our part. So just kind of like what we're doing now, working hands-on with these companies, really defining great commercial use cases, documenting them, taking them public, and then taking them directly to new client types for them. Onboard them, show them how easy it is to acquire it, and take it from there. So I give that about 2 years before what we're doing kind of becomes a standard, let's say. And within that standard, we're looking to solve crucial industry stuff such as, like satellite imagery transfer standards, right? The industry is kind of very segmented under how people are packaging and transferring things, et cetera, right? And we want to create, one of the beauties, I think, of blockchain is it creates kind of this underlying layer that goes across.
Another question that makes me think about is when we're thinking about how this potentially changes the ecosystem of the way that people buy and sell, people request, people have access to EO data. The current model is, I don't want to say siloed, but it's certainly much more centralized. And it's also certainly today, in some cases, very vertically integrated, right? So this changes that, right? So we're talking about an economy around this data where multiple users could be placing bids for what it is they need, right, for data. Multiple satellite providers could be trying to acquire that data for them at the lowest cost, or at a premium product because it's something very niche, right? So okay, I understand that. I understand that. Yeah, and that's obviously going to have disruptive market forces. So how does that relate to these large constellations we keep hearing about? And I prefer to call them arrays because I feel like constellations should be reserved for heavenly bodies, but either way. But these large arrays that companies are putting up right now, that won't apply to their model, right? Because that's a vertically integrated stack, right, for their solution. They have the satellite, they're packaging the data, they're selling the data all in one stack.
That's something that when people ask, well, how are you going to approach these big entities, right? I had, I presented to NASA and some of its commercial partners a few weeks ago. And, one of my ways to approach that and I said that straight up, to NASA, and I'll say it to pretty much any big company is, listen, I want to provide a solution that allows you guys to much more effectively and efficiently commercialize already what you're doing, not be disruptive actually. But I don't need you to accomplish, I don't need you to do that to accomplish what I'm setting to accomplish, because I can bring you in through market force by getting 1,000 startups and these SMEs who at the end of the day are outside of the governments, are a big buying force, of yours. And you're going to be forced to change, just like almost every single industry has when it comes to any digitization or from a commercial sense or a P2P sort of capabilities. So my thing is, just as you can find interviews of me over years speaking about blockchain tech, whether it's, applied to music, whether it's my stuff, in the financial space. But these segments, these big players are going to have to eventually adjust to that reality, because I'm going to tell you, a lot of these entities that are buying from them, these guys that need to move fast, they're taking data from different sources, analyzing it, restructuring it, selling it on. They don't like the attitude of, well, this is how you're going to get it and you're going to like it. And this is what you're going to pay. And why should you pay it? Because we say so. We don't really have anybody else to tell us otherwise, right? So, and my thing is that I think you were kind of touching on when you're talking about it going across is one of these really big factors that's an issue. Like these satellite companies will tell you the same. They go, we really don't know what is the market value of what we're selling. We don't know what the actual price is. Well, one reason is because there is no real market for it. Yeah. You haven't allowed a large swath to determine what the potential market value is. So one of the effects of what we're doing, I think you're going to see, is you're going to start seeing a refinement and a closer definition to what is the true market value of satellite data and imagery, for example.
And that pricing too, it comes down to a market structure, right? So the improved market structure where you have multiple participants potentially making their imagery available, and then other participants, looking to acquire that imagery, you find a market price quicker that way, right? So I appreciate that. I also think that there is an element of transparency there too, right? So when people see potentially how much the others are paying for their imagery data, or see how they source their imagery data, it gives them, more leverage for their business, right? So the pricing, right? We can see pricing coming down potentially as more people have access, there's more information about what the prices are. That's what we see in almost all markets, right? More participants, prices come down. More transparency, prices come down, right? Because there's just these market factors and economics to make that
Also,
the case.
another thing is, there's an extremely limited client funnel that's been created, or user funnel right now.
Yeah.
And if you make it a lot more easy to access, acquire, and consume, and you start building better awareness within different industry segments and people within them on how they can use it and apply it, just like, a lot of people don't know that hedge funds use satellite imagery and data.
Yeah.
Right. So if you increase, this supply of acquirers, and you have, one thing why we focus on what we call digital space assets, and at least in the beginning, we're not focused on parts of rockets and things like that, is because I can take that imagery, I can resell it infinitely, right? If I find enough buyers that find it valuable, right? So that's also going to really redefine, and I think over long term, cut down costs of all this stuff, along with, of course, advancements in the more upstream technology factor, because I'm not, outside of, focusing on that in that sense. But I think not too much, but I think everybody's eyes are on that, and they're not kind of looking down as what's operating underneath them and moving all this stuff and providing access to it.
No, I like that. And it makes sense, right? So as this market matures, there's going to be this growing need, and that's what Copernic Space is doing. It's servicing that need on both sides of the equation. Love it. Any parting thoughts for folks? Anything we didn't hit on that you'd like to circle back to?
Oh God, I don't know where to start with it. Just know that it's closer than I think a lot of people know. It's still kind of abstract to some. One thing Samson and I, got together was this whole digital natives idea. And my thing is that, the space industry itself has barely entered Web 2.0 aspects. There is no real kind of digital commercialization approach. So
there's been numerous papers that would validate that premise, right? I mean, you look at the gray wave issues that NASA and other major space industry players have right now. So to think that they've already gone to a place where they could be considered digitally native is just not true. They don't even have a workforce representation that looks digitally native.
Yeah, even if just because you work on software doesn't mean you're digitally native. I think that's more of a mind state and day-to-day approach, and how you consume and use things in life, right? Yeah. And how you view things in life. So, no, I'm just, for us, MVP just came out. We're working with partners on it. We're going through a funding round right now when it comes to that. And we have, towards the end of the year, in between, we're going to have a public beta where we're going to show and execute, some of these use cases. And then we're going to do a more kind of formal public full launch end of year, beginning of next. But we're moving fast. We're working with quite a few really cool partners, and I'm really thankful and happy that great people such as yourself who can give me an outlet and a platform, to help maybe push it a little bit further even and faster.
Well, it was a pleasure to have you on. I will definitely have you back as you get closer to your public launch. That way we can make sure people are aware of it and they can, participate in the marketplace as well.
Thank you, man. Really appreciate it.
All right, no problem. Talk to you again soon.
Yeah.
And we're out. All right. This is where we do the after stuff.
You're such a professional with I noticed when you started off, you did the smile, even though we already did the intro, you did the smile, and right there, very professional lead off. So I appreciate it.
So what's funny is, so we're still going to record, because what ends up happening is we're going to say something that's genius, and or not. Sometimes it's not. But if we say something that's great, the production folks will like do their magic.
Yeah.
And they'll capture it.
I need people like that, because I got loads of video content, but I fucking can't do it.
Well, I mean, that's why we bought a production studio, right? We just had to have our own. So, but no. So one of the things that we didn't touch on this time, and I didn't, because I know I'm trying to like get people curious about what you're working on, but I don't want to, pick up the hood. I don't want to pick up the hood too far. But one of the things though that we didn't touch on is all of the amazing space IP that is out there that isn't digitized and that people aren't accessing. And that's not even beginning to get unlocked in this, in the space economy, right? So space industry, like they have the IP, but the larger economy could unlock that. And I wonder how Copernic Space fits into that, and how Copernic Space could be a solution to that.
It depends on what the IP is. I've had a really big struggle around this. It's one of the core, when we're starting, one of the things is, shit, it might even be on our old MVP user interface as well.
Mm-hmm.
But IP was stated before imagery.
Yeah.
I had a call.
This is a known issue, and it boggles me that there's not other people working on this, right? Because, like I've heard you talk about it, but
because it's really hard. I'll tell you why it's hard from a few ways. Like literally, I've been trying for years, and it hasn't been easy around this, because around the IP, a lot of times you're also dealing with scientific entities.
Right.
And no matter how open and how great and excited, I had a call with this guy the other day. I've had a few with him, and there's moments where I start kind of losing my patience and stuff, but he's such a fucking sweet guy. He's French, but he's in Switzerland, and he's some brain, whatever. And he's built this thing he calls the Terminator, which costs about $275 million to build one, but it will eat up all that space debris.
Yeah, right? That's awesome.
And he can also use it on Earth for various other methods around CO2 emissions, et cetera. And he's sitting there and he's like, I got the Terminator, and he's got it all patented and all this sort of shit. And he's sending me stuff every week, right? Because he's sitting on some, but he has no idea what to do with it. And my thing is okay, for stuff like that, I have the Smart Fund, right? And then for other things, I ask him, do you have any IP, a patent that's commercializable right now? Right. And the thing is how are users what are they going to do with like IP or these patents, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, are they going to license it for 2 years so they can build something based off of it? And then it goes into a million different directions, but I want to create that standard.
Yeah.
Right. So as I told you, like we see a few standards that need to be created for the space economy. One is satellite data imagery access transfer standard. Geo is going to be another one. The other one that you heard with the satellite ride sharing is going to be for like software API access applications, whether it's general user interface or API. So like on that one, the cool thing is like you buy an orbit, and when you enter his platform, you're already logged in, you already have the orbit, and you can start using the application. You don't have to go, right? So, and then obviously I want to build some sort of the database and standard. Oh, fuck, I forgot to mention it too. Because what did you brought up around some sort of, the market data, right? Like I had a call with my head of data the other day, and I go, bro, there's almost no space market data. Like legit, it's all very theoretical almost, kind of one of these industry brain trust sort of
Yeah.
reports.
No
Like
naming
raw,
names. We don't have to name any names, but yeah, I know what you're talking about. I know what you're talking about.
like raw data,
Yeah.
So I go, bro, it's a gold mine. Start thinking about it in that way. Because other than like space ventures, there's not even like a database of space companies really.
Well, you've got all the space. I mean, there's stuff, but you have to subscribe, right? There's some subscription based. There's some subscription based lists that I know that we subscribe to, like on the for the consulting firm that we subscribe to, and we'll use those really when we're looking at other firms that we want to talk to and engage with, right? So in addition to seeing who's talking at conferences and who's got papers coming out, we'll go through those lists too. And I mean, at this
See,
point, like at this point, I'm not doing at this point, we're not really doing cold calls, because we have enough people just that we've met and networked with online, or from just doing conferences. But yeah, I mean, there's lists, but I think they're all paywall lists at this point,
or segmented or whatever. I'd like
or
literally,
segmented. Yeah.
I've only seen the Space Ventures one do anything that I really found to be like easily accessible and valuable, and it's still pretty much like an Excel put up on a on a website, right?
Yeah, but it's better than zero. I mean, hey, I mean, you got to start the list somewhere. So
no, I know, but I told him, I was like, this is a great resource. So so to your thing, thank you for that. It inspired me a little bit right now. I need some help with it, to be honest. I'm kind of trying to solve obviously a bunch of fucking big problems already. So listen, thanks for that. Just know that it's something I'm seriously approaching. I have some ideas how to approach it, but it's such a broad thing. So I think it's going to take some time and collaboration with people such as yourself, or people that that could help with that.
Yeah, let us know. I mean, we booked out we've pretty much booked our consulting calendar through the summer. But Sam and I actually have to have a conversation about this, or call later today, to be like, okay, so we got 5. Like, do we need to hire some more people? Because I don't know. Like, do we want to stay what we're doing and like just keep that focus, or do we want to grow a little bit? So that, I don't know. That's neither here nor there. But like, yeah, there's a lot of things that need solves, and there are so many of these things that we keep hearing about where I'm like, okay, like that makes sense, but that's not quite the right way to do it. And I know this guy's doing it over here, so they can come together. Maybe we could do. So I'm not sure exactly, but yeah, I mean, these things all need better solutions. and people who think, oh yeah, like that solution is just going to magically appear in 10 or 12 years. No, someone's going to figure that out in the next 2 or 3 years. Yeah. And either you can be part of figuring it out or not. But I think people are still in this mentality where it's like, oh yeah, that's a decade away, that's 2 decades away. No, like this is happening now. Most of the stuff is happening now. So
even some of these, even like we have Space Gold is a project, that we're going to do some stuff with, and even the stuff that they're trying to do it's far, but it's not that far away in reality.
Right, like I mean, and I think it's the people who really have been in the trenches and from my point of view as an economist, like done the math. I'm like, no, this can happen. Like this isn't theory at this point, right? This isn't Star Trek. Like this is
well back to that, allowing the public or the greater market to become actively involved in the economy. Is you're increasing a wider capability to push that forward. So
well, that's why that's why we yeah, I mean, that's why we're the lead investor over on Bright.us. It's BRITE, by the way, but that's why we're the lead investor over there, because we're like, hey, we want to help, companies in the space and technology vertical access this regulatory method of funding through crowds, through enthusiasts, through people who are already into space, into the technology side of it. But again, like you talked about, in a regulatory compliant way, to get some of these raises done, because if it's like you said before, someone's in their silo and they're in the tech silo and they're a genius, right? They're a giant brain, but they don't know how to access these capital markets, right? And if you have a giant brain with a lot of IP, but I can't get you funded, then none of us are going to get to take advantage and benefit from that technology. And there's
How
just
is it
too
spelled again?
much of that now.
It's bright.us, right?
Yeah, brite.us.
Yeah, I took a look at it before. So what's it providing? Tell me more, because maybe there's a way to, to collaborate around it, maybe not.
Yeah, they have they have a Reg CF, right? They have all their licenses, they have all their approvals. They are waiting for their launch to coincide with the March 15th launch. So that's coming up, and that's when the limits on the raises go to 5 million.
Okay. All right. So they have the same kind of thing that Space Gold has, actually. So you don't
maybe
have
it's similar. Yeah, maybe it's similar. I'll have to look up their stuff some more, and then we can kind of compare notes on. But maybe it's similar, maybe it's not, or maybe there's a way that they, maybe there's a way they play well together. Like I said, we searched around for a while, and when we saw what they were doing, we're like, okay, we love it, because what they're basically doing is they're providing capitalization as a service. Right. So they've built out the entire back end. They have the middle office automated. And so now it's very plug and play. And that's really where it needs to be. The high touch folks in that industry, there's not their margins there, right? Or if there is the margins, because the platforms are charging folks, 7%, 10%, 12%. Like, you can't do it. You gotta do it at 5 or less. And you can only do that with enough automation and enough on the back end. So, it's all the tech folks who built it out.
Who's the crowd in this?
What do you mean, who's the crowd?
Requires the crowd? Like, you guys bring a crowd to the table, or you guys just provide the platform that hosts and provides the capability for the crowd to fund?
The regulations do not allow the platforms to provide marketing for a cloud.
But do you guys have, like, let's say, a user base that's already on the table?
Right. But the way the regs work is, there's no this, like, FOMO and pumping and shilling stuff, right? It's none of that, right? It's none of that stuff, right? It's folks are bringing in their communities are plugging in, and then they get to see the deal flow, and they get to participate or not. And then they go through, the underwrite, they go through the vet, or sorry, it's not an underwrite. That underwrite means something. But they go through, the vetting process. They'll go through a process of where the boards will have open communication, so people will talk about projects if they like, if they want to participate, and everything like that. So, all right, I'm sorry, I gotta cut us off here. I gotta go to my next one, but this was a good grant. Well, let's hook up again, and we can compare notes on the gold stuff.
Come on, or what? Or we're moving that. Or what happened with that?
He'll have to do another one with you. He missed it, man. That's on him. We did our part.
All right.
We did our part.
Well, tell him that I won't forgive him for that. And he'll
Good. You should hold him accountable for that kind of stuff.
He's talking all this shit, and then he can't even come on the
Zoom. All right. Hey, I'll see you in the next orbit, man.
And please just email me what to expect next with this, so I can prepare and help you guys, market it and all that stuff. Okay.
For sure.
Thank you.
All right. Talk to you later. Bye.
Yeah.